The views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the program host and do not necessarily reflect or represent the views and opinions held by TCN TV Network Incorporated. Due to the social nature of this broadcasting channel, videos may contain content copyrighted by another entity or person. The TCN TV Network claims no rights to the said content. TCN TV Network cannot be held accountable for the copyrighted content. TCN TV Network is a messenger and sharer of information and strives to verify but cannot warrant the accuracy of copyrights or completeness of the information on this program.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of On Point, your #1 political and current affairs talk show program. This evening, we're coming to you live from the TCN Network studios right here in the beautiful city of Brampton. And we have a lot on the program here to discuss with you today. First up, we are taking a look at election signs. For those of you in Brampton as well as around the rest of the country, you would have heard a lot of conversation coming from some of our elected officials here in the city of Brampton about a proposal to take a ban on election signs. Now, election signs, what are they? Election signs is one of the clearest indication that an election is in the air, that people are about to go out and vote. It tells us who the candidates are in an election. It tells us what positions they are running for. It tells us, in some cases, what party these candidates belong to. I'd like to submit that election signs are a healthy part of a democracy. You know, they show the world that we can compete in peace, we can compete in harmony, that people are free to express their preferences without any fear of repercussions. In some countries around this world, election signs cannot be used to express your support for a candidate. It will lead to serious backlash and in some cases even lead to death. But not here in Brampton, not in Ontario, not in Canada. We are a mature democracy. We love our democracy and we want to ensure that we protect that democracy. So, sometime last week we had 7 councillors here in the city of Brampton who expressed a view that they would like to see the city explore the possibility of banning election signs. And this ban would apply not only to municipal elections, but this ban will somehow apply to provincial elections, to federal elections, and all elections here in the city of Brampton. Let's take a look. We're going to take a quick clip. We'll have a clip ready for you. And we're going to listen to what Councillor Santos, who brought forward this motion, want to hear what she has to say. And then we'll take out to our team and we will have a discussion about these issues of election signs. So let's take a clip, let's listen, and then we have a conversation about it.
Councillor Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to our bylaw team who stayed for this added item. This is actually about election signs and starting to entertain the conversation on banning election signs. I have a written motion sitting beside Councillor Paleshi that perhaps you could pass to the clerk so that it could go up on the board while I bloviate on the issue. So last week on June the 14th, a number of candidates as well as elected councillors were in line at the Brampton courthouse dealing with sign violations and issues, paying fines, and in the midst of standing in that line, councillors who were there were privileged to hear all the various complaints from candidates who lost the election and candidates who won the election about the sign wars that many of us go throughout a campaign. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because I think Brampton should take a lead in the same way that we've taken the lead on the climate motion, in the same way we took the lead on looking at banning single-use plastics. Election signs are probably the worst when it comes to those sorts of things. The second issue is cost to enforcement. So we spoke to our bylaw heroes over here in terms of the cost to actually enforce the existing bylaw around election campaign signs. And the reality is that the return on investment to the city is negative. It costs us a lot more to enforce the existing bylaw than it does in terms of giving us any sort of revenue. And I'm going to ask Mr. Morrison to come up if I can, to just answer a few questions with that regard. The other issue and some of the arguments about whether we should ban or not ban has to do with the impact on democracy and whether or not this is an issue that, you know, if we get rid of campaign signs, it means that we're interfering with democracy. I will argue, as a campaign manager managing successful and unsuccessful campaigns for the past 12 years of my life, that campaign signs do not equate to votes, and campaign signs are no longer as impactful as a tactic. In fact, I will argue that campaign signs almost act as a barrier to entry for new candidates, but also hinders and has a negative impact on voter turnout because it becomes about the signs and the sign war versus the issues that are most important about a campaign and election. So, and then the fourth thing I want to highlight on this is that other jurisdictions around the world, including the UK, do not have election signs, and in fact, their voter turnout and democratic participation is higher than what we see here now. So I now turn it over to the questions to staff.
There you have it, an exploratory move to explore whether or not we should ban campaign signs here in the city of Brampton. We have with us this evening to get into these issues. We have Kimberlee Ajibolade, who is here with us this evening. She's a community activist as well as an HR professional. We have with us Mr. Mario Russo, no stranger to On Point viewers. He's a businessman here in downtown Brampton. And we have joining us, we have Mr. Len Carby, who is joining us as well, who is an investment advisor with one of the top financial institutions here in this country. Let's get into this. Kimberlee, should we be looking at banning election signs? Are there, as Councillor Santos put it, the worst form of waste in terms of plastics, single-use plastics we have?
I don't believe so. She was arguing that it's not an infringement on, one's democratic right. I think it is. I had the privilege of working on Mayor Patrick's Brown, and I even had people calling in. They were talking about they want the signs. They want to show which party they're representing. I think visibility is important. I think without the signs, it automatically puts the incumbent at an advantage. And now that Councillor Santos is councillor, that might work out beneficial for her, I believe. I think it's important. Mr. Russo, actually, I know, Mary, I've seen the face, but the name came about when I saw your sign. I think it's so important. You get to see their the party. You get to see what their platform is and then read up on that. So when they come to your door, then you can ask those questions. But if you have no knowledge that they're even running, I think the public ban that's existing right now should be sufficient. I think candidates should continue to be able to do put signs on private property, and of course they already need permission to do that. So like parking and any other thing that's regulated municipally, I think that if candidates are in contravention, they get fined, but it shouldn't be different. I think it should be their choice if they want to use it or not. And if they do, when they can use it next year. So I would say it's very extreme. It's not for the least, I think, how do I say, an environmental issue. I think it's a lot of political rhetoric, my opinion.
Len Carby, your reaction to what Councillor Santos had to say?
I think it's actually quite rich that as soon as she wants signed hand. I have a number of concerns around that. I certainly don't believe it will increase or is really affecting the voter turnout. I actually believe that it will negatively affect voter turnout, contrary to her opinion, which seemed to was being formed while standing in line to pay the fines. signed. So it seems to me that the idea and the motion was not quite thought out, but seemed like something that was a spur of the moment idea to bring a motion to council. Already have lower turn. We have a very campaign season. So that very short season.
We will come back to you, Len Carby. We are up on the first commercial break. Let's take the commercial break, and then we will come right back to you. Stay with us on Point. We're talking election signs in Brampton and the motion before council to ban them. Stay with us.
With so many newspapers within the community, it's sometimes hard to tell what separates us from the rest. Most of the time, they all brag about the same thing. You know, the large circulations, tons of online views, and it can go on and on. But what really separates the Toronto Caribbean newspaper apart from everybody else? Well, it's simple. Our service. No, seriously. Hi, I'm Grant Browning, founder and CEO of the Toronto Caribbean newspaper. I have over 20 years of branding and marketing experience, and I've worked with countless companies and corporations to do one thing, and that is to raise their profits with their brand. With over 40 years of combined experience in branding and marketing, our amazing staff is fully prepared to sit down and figure out exactly what you need to stand out from your competitors.
The reason why you don't see that anymore is because
the ad is too powerful, bring too much people.
So what are you waiting for? Give us a call today. We'll be happy to help.
Are you retiring smart? Make your home's equity work for you. With your home's equity and our 30 years of experience, the Retire Smart Properties team can help you achieve the quality of life you've always wanted. Our services are 360 degrees. We'll give you advice, take care of staging and selling, and help you find the perfect home and community to transition to. It's time to enjoy the retirement lifestyle you deserve. Visit our website today to learn how you can use your home to retire comfortably. The Retire Smart Properties team, powered by RE/MAX West.
Welcome back to On Point, your number one political current affairs and talk show. We're here broadcasting live from the city of Brampton in the TCN studios, and we're talking this evening about some municipal affairs. We're talking about election signs. There is a motion before the Brampton Council to ban all forms of political campaign signs, whether you're running for municipal election, provincial, or the federal election. And just before the break, Len Carby, we were hearing from you your reaction to Councillor Santos's motion to put a ban on campaign signs.
Yes, so I won't repeat what I had said earlier, but just to add to that, I think we already have a very short campaign season. And the period of time that campaign signs are visible is extremely
days.
short and doesn't give the opportunity for new individuals who want to get their name out there the opportunity within a very short period of time. So taking that away, I think that would give the incumbent a significant advantage. I think there's also a significant lack of media in Brampton. And so the opportunities that newer folks have to advertise and to get their name out there is quite limited because of that lack of media that's available in the city. So I think that would also, I think the price of advertising would go up if the media companies now understand that the candidates have no other option but to rely on them because they don't have signs. I think there is definitely an advantage that would be created to incumbents, and I think that affects our democracy. So I don't think that enough research has gone into this idea. And I would recommend that they take a more serious look at it than just forming an idea out of standing in line.
We'll dive into it some more. Mario, let's get your first reaction before we get into some other stuff. Let's get your first reaction to hearing about this motion, to seeing what Councillor Santos has to say there just now that, for example, the city took a lead in putting a ban on single-use plastics. A number of these election signs are indeed made from plastic material. And as she put it, these are the worst kinds of plastics to have. Your initial reaction?
Well, I'll address that shortly. I want to touch upon what Len had mentioned. I think this is, I think it's very premature. I do, though, I want to highlight to council's credit, if you will. This is not, at this point in time, not a vote on to ban or not to ban. They brought the motion forward, and I believe it was 7-4, to have staff report back with recommendations.
Yeah, correct.
And I think that's a very important point. I am not a big fan of signs. Let me start with that. I'm not a big fan of signs, but I believe they are a necessity. I do believe they are a necessity in terms of perception. Perception becomes a reality in campaigning. When someone sees your name, you're out there, it becomes whether it be that people start now donating, people start wanting to become volunteers, that becomes the reality. So perception becomes a reality. I do get a little bit of respectfully a chuckle that all the members that are elected, similar to many people that are on the panel, were campaigning and had no objection to campaign signs 9 to 10 months ago. I guess the environment has gotten much worse in 9 to 10 months. I'm going to use an environmental component. I'm going to speak real quickly on this. So
let's before you get there, let's put on the record that myself, sitting at the table, did run for election in the fall, same time as the other councillors. Maria Russo also here, for the sake of transparency, also ran in that election. So we know how important it was for us to have campaign signs out there. At that time, if you don't have a sign out there, you are not in the game. All right, people not recognizing you as a serious contender. So put that out there for the record. But she's saying that it would not have a negative impact on our democracy, and the fact that signs does not equal to votes. Is there truth to that?
Well, the common term used, and I believe she had used that as well, is signs don't vote. That is true. Signs do not vote, but they do get the message out there. If it's a tight race, that may be the 1 or 2% that win the election. If it is a matter of getting 10% more volunteers out, it's a numbers game. Elections are a numbers game. So getting that recognition, getting your name out there. Backtracking is that I think there is a serious revision that has to be looked at here. And that's what I'm hoping this staff report comes back with. Private property versus commercial properties. Getting some type of affidavit. There are people that are putting signs on properties that don't get permission. And I mean, that's the reality. The cost of enforcement definitely needs to be looked at. But I'm going to backtrack quickly to environmental. Listen, getting rid of signs could have a minimal impact. I think getting rid of newsletters for councillors would have a greater impact.
I want to get to the newsletters in a little while, but Len Carby, two things. Is it a matter of an environmental impact, or can we put a bylaw in place to say, while we don't allow plastic-made signs, since as a city we're looking at putting a ban on single-use plastics, are we able to say, okay, we want signs made from renewable material, make them from cardboard, make them from wood? So is it so much that it's such a bad thing for the environment to have a sign, or is simple, do we need to look at what material are we allowing these signs to be made from? Yeah. And while you're on it as well, as the financial person among us, in your professional role as an advisor, does signs become a barrier to entry into the political process for candidates due to the cost?
So to the first point, I really don't see that, actually refresh me on the first question.
So the first question we're looking at is, are there other forms that signs can be made from rather than plastic?
I wanted to pick up off something Mario said earlier, because the truth is, I will, give credit to the council, some credit, because this is at this point a study. And I think that indicates the importance of us spending a little bit more time understanding what exactly, we're looking at here. It wasn't a motion to necessarily ban the signs at this stage. But I think more needs to come out of that study that will determine what kinds of signs will be allowed, what, whether it's single-use plastic or whether it's going to be renewable material, biodegradable material. All of those things can be put into the bylaw that speaks to what is doable. As someone who actually ran so many years ago,
oh, I forgot that.
I didn't run in the last election, but I can tell you that even to this day, I have individuals who remember the contact made because of the sign that they saw and remember the name from that time. I don't believe that it makes entering the race prohibitive if campaign signs are included. In fact, it was on a shoestring budget, which I had many years ago in 2010 when I ran. That was one of the main things I spent money on, and it was quite impactful, I think.
Mario, she says as well that we run out of time. You have 2 minutes, and we're going to get Kimberlee in here as well. She says that these signs have a negative impact on voter turnout. She didn't expand on that, but can you see a situation where having campaign signs result negatively on the voter turnout?
I would never understand the correlation between negative impact on signs. I think it will only bring recognition. It does allow people to have or make it conscious that there is an election going on, as you mentioned. I think the voter turnout and finding out strategies to increase voter turnout is essential, but I don't think signs have any pros or cons on that. I think it just brings recognition to that something is going on. Most people actually will ask, oh, I guess it's an election, when they start seeing the signs out. And campaign has already been going on for months, right?
So I think it's important to point out that signs are only allowed on the streets, I think, about 27 days before an election. So they are not there for an extended period of time. In Brampton, for example, we have, I think it was 34% last year in terms of voter participation, voter turnout. So we have a very low voter turnout. She went to the UK for an example, and in my research, the UK does allow for campaign signs. I spoke with individuals who in the political circle in the UK today, and they're like, oh, no, we have our campaign signs for sure. And they have, for example, a 46% voter turnout. In Toronto, where we had a 34% voter turnout in the last election, Toronto had a 41%. In Calgary, it's as high as 58%. In London, Ontario here was about 39%. So we are lagging behind in terms of voter participation. If we get rid of campaign signs, do we see that quickly of 30 seconds, Mario? Do we see that improving, or are we going to get lower in terms of voter participation?
Frankly, lower. In terms of if people don't recognize there is an election going on, frankly, they will not come and vote. I don't think that's the end all. It's not going to be the make it or break it, but it is a component. I think changes need to be looked at for signs, and that's what I'm hoping these recommendations come forward. I guess once we come back from commercial, I'll talk about some other aspects that, alternatives. Let's look at alternatives. Let's look at different ideas. Let's look at getting the city to have affidavits from everyone that actually takes a sign. These are ideas, right? So as opposed to, let's say, banning, think of alternatives that we can create a cleaner city, create a more competitive component, and frankly, more important than signs, I'm going to throw it out there, we need some type of term limits, perhaps. Those are different things that we can look at, not necessarily just on the sign thing, but if the sign, if there are term limits, then the sign component doesn't become as advantageous. So these are ideas that should be looked at as serious.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay with us. We have a few more conversations coming up. We're going to talk about some newsletters. We'll talk about some petitions that you're seeing going around in the city of Brampton. Stay with us. This is On Point.
At Benjamin Law, we understand the real cost of personal injuries. As the victim of an accident, you may be the one who's physically hurt, but your main concern is that your family are the ones who will pay the price. Benjamin Law will be there for you, helping, supporting, and working tirelessly to resolve your personal injury case. Call 1-855-899-4878 or visit benjaminlaw.ca and let our family of lawyers help your family.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. May your dreams all come true. Happy birthday to you.
We refuse to promote, report on anything negative in the community.
ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to On Point, your number one political and current affairs program, broadcasting to you live from the CTN network right here in the beautiful city of Brampton. We're talking some municipal affairs, we're talking election signs, we're following up on a motion that was placed before council for staff to explore the possibility of banning election signs. There are a few things that came up, Kimberlee. We were talking about the advantage to the incumbent, should we ban election signs. One of the things that we see in Brampton, I think there is a quarterly newsletter that goes out from members of council to constituents. If we don't have election signs, does that quarterly newsletter create a kind of an advantage, a great advantage to the incumbents who are on council?
I do believe so. I do believe so, and I think the newsletters is something gridded to look at as opposed to signs. I overheard you guys talking a little bit about maybe looking at options for the signs in terms of the material. I think that's a more realistic idea, but to take away the sign, I think that's a little bit drastic.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any correlation with a negative impact on voter turnout at all. It has to be positive with all the recognition and the visibility.
Then, newsletters going out from, I compared, for example, and then again, the Councillor Santos, she went to the UK for some examples. So I went to the UK for some examples, and I looked at the newsletters that they send out, and I looked through quite a few of the newsletters that go out from, for example, the City of London, from the City Council members. I don't see any where councillors are sending pictures of themselves at barbecues or at community meetings, hugging babies, kissing babies, and doing all these things. Should we therefore take a look at the content of these newsletters that are going out from councillors to constituents on the taxpayers' dime, I might say? Should we therefore change that to have a general newsletter from the staff, probably prepared by staff, that are not partisan, right, that are not there to promote the councillors, but are there to inform residents of the great issues that the city of Brampton is working on? Should we therefore take a look to say, change the concept, make them from staff and not from the elected people?
So first of all, I do believe that it's important that the city councillors have the opportunity to communicate with their constituents. I believe that the city should always be talking about the advances that are being made, progress that is being made, and be communicating with residents at all times. But having said that, I think there are different ways that you can communicate, and in this day and age, sending out pieces of paper might not be the most efficient way. We have become a very electronic society, and there are ways that we can actually save financially by using other methods of communication. I also concur that using these newsletters on taxpayers' dime to be a personal promotional tool is something that should be looked at, because ultimately what ends up happening is that the taxpayer is paying for your continued campaigning. And of course, that just simply gives you a stronger opportunity to remain in that place. And I believe in a healthy democracy and believe that there should be a healthy turnover of individuals at City Council. And so anything that is going to prevent that healthy turnover from happening, I would have a challenge with that.
You mentioned healthy turnover. Mario Russo, just before we took the commercial break, was giving a hint at possible term limits. If you are going to take away the exposure that new persons would get in the political arena, then there should be some form of term limits. Mario, these newsletters, are they designed to keep the councillors or the current elected officials constantly in campaign mood or constantly before the electors out there? And would that be an unfair advantage to persons who want to enter the race in 3 or 4 years as a part of that constant renewal of leadership and of thought at the council?
Well, absolutely. I think to Len's point, I think engaging with constituents is essential. But in an electronic age, through social media, through websites, through just physically hitting the doors, I think that's more important. The key component that I see is that it's on the taxpayer's dime. If they want to send out newsletters, perhaps looking at including that in their personal budgets may be something to look at. But I'm going to give you some quick math. 11 members of council, 1 mayor, 10 councillors. That's 1 newsletter from the mayor, 5 newsletters from council. That's approximately, I'm going to be conservative, 50,000 doors from the councillors and $250,000 from the mayor. That is approximately 1.5 million pieces of mail that are going out throughout the year. And that's not including postage. That's not including someone delivering it. So I'm talking about, let's go back to cleaning up the environment. I think that's a pretty serious carbon footprint. So back to the idea of how it's 4 years of campaigning. It is name recognition. Name recognition is imperative in any municipal or federal or provincial election, and that is getting your name out there. You want to hit the doors. I think that's amazing. I think you want to engage the constituents via social media. You want to spend your own dollars or even your budgetary dollars on sending that newsletter. Let's look at it that way.
Yeah, we have been looking a lot at the impact municipally, but these bans, Kimberlee, would go across the municipal boundaries. Will also impact federal elections, would also impact provincial elections. Can we see a situation? Let's say, for example, this current provincial government. Can we see a situation where a Ford government would put up with something like this from the city of Brampton, or is this just another way the city of Brampton is trying to aggravate the current provincial government that we have?
It's likely. I don't foresee that happening. I don't know how they would put that over. It's an interesting thought. And thank God at this point, as a thought, I don't think that would, I don't know if they're trying to use that as leverage to gain some attention of other things. Obviously, we know the mayor and the premier are not really on the same page. I don't know if enough of these will help him to listen, but I don't foresee it going over.
Len Carby, a federal government would want to run an election without having campaign signs up. I mean, this is about us electing who can be prime minister for our country. Do we see any is there any precedents anywhere around the world for something like this?
I can't think of it. I am not aware of it at all. But I mean, I know that I can't believe that everywhere in the world uses campaign signs. So I wouldn't say it's unheard of. However, that has become part of the democratic process that we have here. It's part of our political culture. And it is one of the things that our constituencies actually look for as a way of knowing who is running for what party. Very often names are so similar, then that's why parties use different colors on their signs, because it creates some identity, creates some differentiation. So I don't think it's likely that this will find support either at the provincial or at the federal level at all.
We have seen, and Kimberlee hinted at this, we know that there is a strain between City Hall, for example, in Brampton and Queen's Park. For example, in City of Brampton, we have seen, for example, where, something we don't normally see. There were demonstrations at City Hall, for example, where we saw councillors came out and were participating in some of these demonstrations, whether it be around education, cuts demonstration, autism, and stuff like that. Are these serving, Kimberlee, I'll ask Kimberlee and Mario, we only have a couple minutes before the break, but are these demonstrations helpful to the relationship that we have in terms of building? We look at this demonstration plus telling the province that you may not be able to put up campaign signs in the city of Brampton. Are these going to be helping our relationships with the province, for example?
I'm not sure if it's going to be helping, but in terms of the demonstration, I think it's just a different means to an end. If they can't get through in a traditional fashion, I think, the mayor along with council, they're doing whatever they feel they need to do to get Brampton their fair share. So it probably likely won't help, but you hope that at some point the government will look at it, the premier will look at that and just hopefully shift in terms of his stance, if you will.
Len's the demonstrations that we have been seeing, is this another further provocation, or are we getting attention?
Well, it could be a bit of both. And I'm for anything that will allow for Brampton to get its fair share and to get the attention that it needs. I don't think it's an all or nothing. I don't think that should be the only approach, but I wouldn't also think that that's a bad idea if it brings attention to the issues which are important to us here the city of Brampton.
Okay. All right. We will take a break right here on Point, and when we come back, we see some petitions going around. We'll have a conversation about it. Stay tuned with us. This is On Point, your political and current affairs program. Stay with us.
With so many newspapers within the community, it's sometimes hard to tell what separates us from the rest. Most of the time, they all brag about the same thing. You know, the large circulations, tons of online views, and it can go on and on. But what really separates the Toronto Caribbean newspaper apart from everybody else? Well, it's simple. Our service. No, seriously. Hi, I'm Grant Browning, founder and CEO of the Toronto Caribbean newspaper. I have over 20 years of branding and marketing experience, and I've worked with countless companies and corporations to do one thing, and that is to raise their profits with their brand. With over 40 years of combined experience in branding and marketing, our amazing staff is fully prepared to sit down and figure out exactly what you need to stand out from your competitors.
The reason why you don't see that anymore is because
The ad is too powerful, bring too much people.
So what are you waiting for? Give us a call today. We'll be happy to help.
At Benjamin Law, we understand the real cost of personal injuries. As the victim of an accident, you may be the one who's physically hurt, but your main concern is that your family are the ones who will pay the price. Benjamin Law will be there for you, helping, supporting, and working tirelessly to resolve your personal injury case. Call 1-855-899-4878 or visit benjaminlaw.ca and let our family of lawyers help your family.
Welcome back to On Point, your political and current affairs talk show program. We're here this evening. We're taking a deep dive into the city of Brampton to look at some issues that are going on out there. We look for a little while on the voter turnout, the issue of campaign signs, concerns were raised about newsletters that we seem to be going out in the hundreds and the thousands, and the environmental impact of those newsletters, and whether it's time as a part of the review that council should review the practice of how we send out those newsletters and the impact they are currently having on the environment. We'll get to another issue. We were hinting at it earlier. I received a letter. I went home one evening and I received a letter from a member of council, and that letter, the member was encouraging me as a former candidate in the last election to sign a petition to try to get a fairer deal for Brampton, as well as indicated that I should help in terms of going around and collecting signatures as well to get different people to sign up to say we want a fair deal for Brampton. Now, I want to make the point that Brampton is, the city of Brampton, the council was duly elected, and they are the duly elected council, the duly elected government to run the city of Brampton. Len, isn't there supposed to be a government-to-government relationship where, you know, the governments can go to the table, they sit down, they have a conversation, they know what each other's priorities are, and you work out the issues at the table? Are we running around signing petitions of the way of negotiating with our government?
Well, since we don't live in a utopia and everything works the way it ought to work, you know, I do agree that there should be a healthy working relationship between the local government and the province. It was clear, however, going into this election that was not going to be the case if Mayor Brown was elected. But the citizens chose Mayor Brown nonetheless. So the citizens understood that this was going to be a challenge for Brampton. And I think it hit us very hard. I mean, like a couple days after, maybe the day after the election, when the announcement was made about the university. And although other cities were impacted, you know, clearly we felt that in Brampton, because there was a lot riding on that downtown revitalization with a university downtown. So I think there has to be a healthy relationship. And, you know, at some point, these two levels of government need to figure out a way to make this work in the interest of the citizens of Brampton, and just simply write it off as a lost cost for 4 years. I think that would be very disappointing if after, we can't break the back of this issue. But I don't think that it's all or nothing. Like I said in the previous segment, or only one or the other. I think as healthy as that relationship ought to be, and as you're striving for that, I think this is more a citizenship engagement strategy. I've been hearing about the need for another hospital in Brampton and better health care for Brampton for a long time, and I see hallway medicine being practiced because my mother-in-law has been impacted by that. Members of my family have been impacted by that. And so I think creating some awareness of the specific issues that the city is bringing to the table that they're going to advocate at the provincial level for, I think this helps to be part of that process, but it should not be all or nothing.
Kimberlee, do you think there will be greater value? For example, the councillor's letter to me, for example, states that Peel Memorial is funded for 10,000 visits, but actually we're having 75,000 visits per year. That Brampton receives $1,000 less in healthcare funding per person than the provincial average. That 55% fewer available hospital beds than the provincial average is in Brampton. And Brampton, as we all know, have a very high level of diabetes. But is there another way for us to engage the provincial government? Why is it that we don't see, the mayor or the councillors in the city of Brampton sitting down with the Minister of Health for the province, for example, who has responsibility over these things, and having a conversation? I don't know if I missed it, but I can't recall seeing any of our councillors raising these concerns directly, sitting down at the table with the Minister of Health on these issues. Why aren't we having that conversation?
That's a good question. I think those are avenues, to Len's point, those are avenues that we should all be tapping in. That should definitely be something that happen above going directly to the province. They need to be tapping into all the bodies. So I haven't seen it. I don't want to say that it hasn't been done, and it has, but I haven't seen it just like you. And I think they should be tapping into everywhere, not just one or the other, not just bounding on the province, but the ministers need to get involved. This petition that they have, that's a good means as well, but it's all options to get Brampton that fair share.
Maria Russo, you are there. I'm not a big fan of this idea of running around signing petitions. I believe you're a government. You should act like a government, and that you should engage with the provincial counterparts, for example, who have responsibility over health care. I can't recall, Maria, I know you have been watching the politics of City Hall very closely, but I can't recall seeing our elected representatives heading down to Queen's Park or evidence that they are reaching out to have a deep and a serious conversation with Queen's Park about healthcare in Brampton, but they are running around signing petitions, collecting signatures. I mean, why aren't we having the conversations? Why aren't we seeing evidence where our elected officials are sitting down with the province to have a conversation, but they are running around signing petitions? This is how governments work?
Well, to your point, Jermaine, I think the municipal government has been elected, and the municipal government and our councillors and our mayor have a fiduciary duty to have our voices heard. I think the fair share component is a very strong argument. I think Mayor Brown ran on that campaign platform, and I think it's been something that's been lacking in Brampton. I think we haven't had our fair share. But to your point of petitions, I don't think that's the responsibility of our municipal government. If other groups in community groups want to get involved and do a petition, so be it. But the fact that we don't have and sometimes you don't even see it, but we should have our councillors meeting with MPPs, meeting with MPs constantly. They need to be advocating for us. They need to be having our voices heard. So the one avenue of having the petition, understanding the fundamentals of it, and basically trying to get the numbers so that the province is somewhat has to listen to us. I understand that, but the fact is there are better avenues, because if you put the province and show that I think that's what's been problematic in Brampton for decades, is the municipal government, the provincial government, and the federal government has never been on the same wavelength. And these are the that create larger rifts than actually bring them together. So I don't believe it's the best avenue. I understand it, but I don't believe it's what the municipal government should be doing.
That's correct. So Len, that's a matter of, we talk about, yes, we recognize the relationship, but, we need to have a situation where these two governments are getting along, working together. I'm wondering, for example, wouldn't a better way be appointing a particular councillor, for example, to say, okay, you have a responsibility to be a liaison as the councillor between for intergovernment affairs, where you're liaising with the provincial government, you're liaising with the federal government, you're liaising with other municipalities and other governments around the country, even around the world. Appoint one councillor to be that. You have a councillor who's responsible for economic development. There's a councillor who's responsible for recreation and services. How about having a councillor responsible for building that relationship and that connection for intergovernment affairs?
I can't say it does not exist. I have not done the research to support that argument. And the idea that it is happening in some other areas, this could be one of those areas that would need some attention. It is clear that this needs attention. It was clear before the election it would need attention. And so it's surprising that that is not, if it is not, one of those areas that specific focus is being put on in terms of how to improve the relationship with the provincial partners. They are also elected officials there too.
Yes.
And they are there to represent the people of Brampton as much as the local representative at the municipal level. So my hope is that this is not something that will continue throughout the entire 4-year term, which was one of my concerns even prior to the election. But here we are. And I think our mayor now has that responsibility to work very hard at either improving that relationship with the provincial partners, whether it is with the man at the top or with other ministers of government, to ensure that the issues which are important to Brampton are kept in the fore and not a personal tiff between two men.
Well, one of the things that we see, Kimberlee, in terms of getting things like a fair deal for Brampton, one of the things I look at Toronto, for example, and I see where their council regularly meets and calls together all the MPPs who are in the Toronto geographical area to come and sit down with council, talk about priorities. I think I've seen one such meeting in Brampton. Do we need to be doing more of that kind of thing to kind of get the provincial MPPs on board to kind of talk about Brampton issues?
I think that would certainly be beneficial. We've seen one-off for different things, and I don't know if they're meeting in their silos, but we certainly haven't been seeing that, and I think that would certainly be helpful. Certainly be helpful. And again, to Len's point, if you can't hit the man at the top, build up those relationships with the MPs and the MPPs and the minister, and then if everybody's coming unitedly for Brampton, then I don't know how, I think it's going to be harder for the premier to refuse that.
Okay. Mario, we also have some challenges as it relates to getting our transit system built. We need funding for that. How do we approach that? The province has not yet come to the table, and we're talking about a government. Do we do another petition to say we need funding for our LRT project? Should that be the next fair deal for Brampton outline, or should we find some other methods of engaging to get this funding that we badly need for transit in Brampton?
Well, I think to your point, that's exactly it. How many petitions are you going to have? It's the responsibility of the government to again, get those messages across. To Len and Kim's point of just getting whatever it takes, MPs, MPPs, get everyone at the table. But I think it also stems, and I do believe that our Mayor Brown is doing a good job of getting, at the very least, council united. And when you have a united council, then you're able to go to the province, to the feds, and say, this is what our constituents are saying to us. I think Brampton is very hard to overlook when you say we have 600,000 to 700,000 people united. I think, again, that's been the fundamental flaw. We've had infighting between councillors. We've had infighting between councillors and MPPs, and so forth. Is that united front has to start. It's a team. The team has to be united, and that united team goes with a united voice. So how that gets done, that's our elected officials' job to do. But again, I don't think that the petition, I understand the philosophy of having the voices heard, but the voices heard on a piece of paper doesn't speak volumes as much as it is getting our elected officials to have those serious meetings with the parties at the province and the federal government. And I'm going to say one thing, if I'm allowed to, one moment, one thing back to the sign thing real quickly. This is going to be some comic relief, but as an Italian Canadian, if we do not have signs, I'm not going to get as many votes because we're going to be missing those tomato plants, right? So I just wanted to include that for some comic relief.
You know, it might be comic relief, but I was following social media today, and you know, one very popular Bramptonian was talking about the uncles who would come to the campaign office, and their job is to tell you about how to win the sign conversation and the sign war. And one was saying, what are the uncles going to do now if you have no signs? Then, one quick minute.
And it's back on the kind of the LRT thing and the idea of having a unified council. Yes, I support a unified council to create a stronger ask at provincial and federal level. But I think healthy debate is also an important part of our democracy. So I don't believe that every vote has to be unanimous at the table. I think it's okay to have opposing views as long as we're able to agree and move in the same direction at the end of the day. And I think part of the issue we have with this LRT conversation is that we in Brampton haven't quite decided what we want with this LRT question. So we're saying that the province must come to the table, and this is one of those issues which is great because the province did come to the table in the previous administration, right? And Brampton said no. So we in Brampton need to decide what it is that we want around this LRT project and what it should look like, and be very clear with our asks to the province. Or else we will always be in this around the mulberry bush.
The council will tell us that they had a united voice on that. No, but we are about to wrap up. I'll wrap up with a plug from the mayor. Very exciting news. I saw a news conference, was it yesterday, when they're announcing hockey nights in Brampton. That will come to raise a lot of funds for our hospital system. Looking forward to that. Encouraging all our viewers. August 22nd, I think the date was. So hopefully very soon tickets will go on sale. So go out and let's all come out and support Hockey Night in Brampton and get our cheers on. This has been On Point for Tuesday, July 16th. We look at some municipal affairs issues. If things are important to you, then they're important to us. We'll have a conversation about them. Join us again next Tuesday when we shall have another issue of great importance to you as Canadians, and we will ask the tough questions. We'll have detailed analysis, and we'll resolve the concerns that you have. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward again to having you on Point next Tuesday at 4. Thank you, Len, Kimberlee, and